Recently, I found myself in a conversation with a guy about scotch, the different types, how they taste, and I was probing to see if we had a similar palate. I just happened to be gifted a bottle of Dalmore 12-year for my birthday, and I was looking for a conversation to match the malt. And boy, did I strike gold with Mitch Russo. I mean, honestly, I didn't know much about Mitch when I started the conversation. I just knew that he was attentive, detailed, and very smart. The kind of guy you'd want to have a glass of scotch with. But when I started to drill down into the vault of Mitch's life, he was very giving with the details, the meanings, and the method that he used to go from a drug-addicted band member to a budding leader and a two-time nominee for Entrepreneur of the Year. 2 successful exits from companies and hundreds of past clients. I mean, there is a recipe for success there that you are going to want to sip slow, because Mitch is an excellent storyteller. You won't want to miss the fine details, and Mitch is widely commended by industry leaders such as Jay Abraham and Tony Robbins, who trusted Mitch to lead his partnership with Chet Holmes from over $5 million to $25 million in sales. Currently, Mitch helps ambitious business owners scale rapidly by turning clients into ambassadors to generate recurring revenue for their companies. And this is life in business. Shaken, not stirred. It's heartfelt and loaded with exciting and interesting turns, and I hope that you enjoy this journey as much as I did. It's full of shady characters, bad decisions, a mom's strong, endearing love, major failure, major success. It's the kind of thing you'd want to see on the big screen. Well, this is Mitch Russo, Director's Cut, worth every second. So clear your mid-afternoon for the maestro of mindful guidance, Mitch Russo. But I have to say that I don't know you well, but I can't wait to get to know you better. And I also, just from my observations of you, you're somebody who shows up in that room at BA as often as possible, and you listen, you engage. I tend to be a very type A person, so I have to kind of get up and walk around, but I'm impressed and I admire your patience, your ability to sit and listen and comprehend, and your contributions to the speakers are always very well thought out and intelligent, and I appreciate that. And in addition to that, I've also noticed that you are, we're in an AI mastermind together, and I've noticed that you're a whiz when it comes to AI. Is that something that comes natural to you, or did you have to really study and learn and kind of dig in?
So, first of all, l'chaim, cheers.
Cheers, thank you.
That's very nice.
You said you're a Highland guy.
Yeah, this is really nice.
I might be a Highland guy too now.
I have to tell you, I'm enjoying this a lot. And
Good.
Thank you for the invitation and the treat, Jeremy. It's been
my pleasure.
Just a pleasure getting to know you as well.
Thank you.
But let me answer your question. You ask if it comes easy to me. You know what comes easy to me are things that I am passionate about. If I'm not passionate about something, then whatever it is, it's not going to come easy to me. So, I mean, if you ask me to get passionate about learning how to post ads on Facebook and optimize them, I'm going to because
Right.
I have no interest in that, and
Right.
not only that, it would be torture. So,
Yeah.
so I assume if I ever went to hell, that would be my torture. I'd be sitting in front of a Facebook ad account.
I'm right there with you. It's been absolute torture for me.
Yeah.
And I understand what you mean.
But I did embrace AI when it first came out. I saw the value of it more, and more importantly, what I have an engineering background, and I have even as a child, I might be slightly on the spectrum, because as a child, I would for enjoyment get parts catalogs, read them, and memorize them. So there used to be a company called Allied Electronics, and I would sit with the catalog while other kids would be reading comic books. I'd be reading the Allied parts catalog.
Wow.
And memorizing the specifications on microphones and devices. And it wasn't that I had any plans for it. It was just so freaking interesting to me. So, and I didn't even try to memorize it. It wasn't what I was trying to do. I was just like, oh my God, what's that? No, wait, what's that? And I would just keep going and going. So everything in life is driven by passion, and everything that has become important to me, I become passionate about. So AI was one of those things. I saw the value right away. I saw the possibility right away too. And I just decided that I was going to apply it. And then I had some great guidance from our AI mastermind.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did what the Peter suggested, which was to, do the work.
Right.
And my big holy moly moment was when I uploaded a chapter of my hopefully soon to be released science fiction novel. I uploaded a chapter to it, and I said, "Tell me what's missing," and it came back with a list of all the things that were missing.
That's the thing that really impressed me the most. I was like, okay, when you spoke up in that mastermind and you were like, well, hey, I've got this course that I've paid for, and I've sort of uploaded this and uploaded the transcripts from this course, created my own custom GPT to coach myself personally.
Yeah.
And then you upload your story, and then you upload, the hero's journey or whatever format you want, and then you've created your own advisor.
That's right.
And that's beautiful. Like I heard that and I was like, this Mitch guy, he's got this figured out.
I don't. It's just a constant experiment. I mean, no one ever told me that this was a good thing to do, but I subscribed. In fact, it was a Christmas present to my daughter and myself. We subscribed to Masterclass, and Masterclass has these brilliant, amazing teachers, and it was like, wow, I can listen to Dan Brown coach me on how to write a mystery. I mean, how am I going to get 3 hours of Dan Brown's time?
Yeah, you're not.
Then those transcripts became the basis for my GPT, for creating a GPT with Dan and James Patterson. And now I have the two greatest writers in the world, as far as I'm concerned, coaching me on my writing skills.
How much time do you have to do creative writing? Because I know you're a very productive business professional with great accolades, and I want to talk about those in a second. But sometimes it's those creative outlets that give us the most life.
It is.
So how long have you been doing creative writing?
Realistically, I failed English. I never learned how to write at all. I had terrible skills. And then when I started and built my software company, Timeslips Corporation, I remember someone telling me that we were going to have to pay $35,000 to have one letter written, one direct mail letter written. And I said, hell no, I'm going to do it myself. And I started studying direct mail and direct response. And the punchline is we ended up spending $30,000 to have somebody actually write it. I learned so much in the process, I started writing all the other emails for the company. That's when I started really learning how to write.
Okay. And so what's your goal with your creative writing? Is it just an activity that keeps you enriched, or do you have a goal to publish it someday?
No. I mean, first of all, I should explain in advance, this is probably going to take me out of the realm of logical business people, but one of the things that I've discovered about myself, and I discovered this completely by accident, is that when I coach clients and I'm working with clients, I'm trying to find the right words to say this. I zone out. So I feel as if I leave the room and a presence speaks through me. And I don't know if it's really, I don't know what to call that. Maybe it's inspiration. Maybe that's all it really is. Mm-hmm. But maybe it's not. But this presence that speaks through me is much smarter than me and gives me much better things to say than I might have said on my own, or maybe together I'm getting the energy of it and then interpreting it is how I now see it. And so it was that energy that came through and told me to write this book.
Really?
Yeah, in 2012. I woke up in the middle of the night. I was on vacation with my teenage daughter, and we were in Nantucket, Massachusetts. And I got out of bed and I grabbed my phone and I searched for the Notepad app and I touched it. And in a daze, I just started, I'm not very good. I did my best with my thumbs and tried to get down. Yeah. And then I said, oh, okay, now I can go back to sleep. And I got up in the morning and I had forgotten I did that. And I said, wait a minute, what? Oh, right, I wrote something. And I read what I wrote and I started to cry.
Wow.
In that 100 or so words was the complete story arc of what has now become a 3-volume trilogy, a science fiction. Now, I've been told it's not science fiction because I don't have enough spaceships in it. It's a fantasy science fiction trilogy, and it's a work of love. So what that means to me is that I don't do it every day, and I don't do it at a particular time of day, but I should. I feel like there's a part of me that says, Mitch, if you were to sit down every day at 4 a.m., then like Dan Brown says, you could like dive right in and just work for 3 hours, and whatever happens, happens. Someday I would like to do that. Mm-hmm. Right now, I just wait for the inspiration. And what happens is I hit a story point, and all of a sudden, I am charged, and I get this huge inspiration, and I can't stop. So this may go on for 5 hours at a time, 3, 4, 5,000 words, and then I'm empty. And then I take a break, and I wait. And I just plant the seed. I need the inflection point that I'm missing. And I wait, and I wait, and I said, wait, I'm going to try this, and I start working again.
That's a beautiful method. I've heard that show up and write 10 bad pages.
Right.
I think it was Tim Ferriss in one of his books. He's like, just show up and write 10 bad pages, and then, ultimately you'll show up and write some phenomenal pages. Because if you wait for inspiration, you'll never get it done. But it seems like this inspiration really, really hits you. And also, by the way, you just happen to be having a glass of scotch with a pop culture nerd. So I have to pause for a minute and talk about the difference between sci-fi and fantasy,
Please.
As I know it.
Yes.
So fantasy is a complete fictional world where dragons exist and laser swords and things like that, where things that could possibly never be invented, things that are so far out there mythologically that it has to be labeled as fantasy. Now, science fiction is rooted in the elements that exist in our natural world, and the technology that happens in those, like Star Trek, like we could see ourselves maybe on a transporter, we could see ourselves on a spaceship, we could see ourselves with warp drives.
Yes.
In fact, I think they're already starting to invent those, right?
Certainly, yes.
So, but we'll probably never ride a dragon, That's the difference between sci-fi and fantasy, as I know it.
I appreciate that. That's a good lead, and then it would have to be both, because there is elements of both of those things in the works that I'm creating.
Phenomenal.
And I don't really know what they are until they arrive. So, and without getting into the details of the story, the bottom line, it's basically, if you take a hero's journey format and apply the good versus evil paradigm, that is the basis for the story. And it takes place on 8 worlds. That's the name of the book, is called The 8 Rivers. And it's basically rivers of consciousness leading to the Supreme Being. It's a little bit theological in an abstract way, but it develops characters, very deep development of characters. And I've been told that people who've read some of what I read, that it's a little bit boring. And I say, I don't care. I have to develop the character the way I feel it's important to do.
Well, I would like to send you a copy of my graphic novel that I wrote.
Oh, yes.
It took me years to write it.
Yes.
I actually hired a photographer, or I shot most of the photos myself because I love photography. I'm a business person, I'm an entrepreneur, but I also have creative outlets. And so I hired actors and I had them show up, and I took photos of them so I could control every scene. And I took that photo and I would send it to a graphic designer.
Yep.
And we created and actually wrote the story behind it. So maybe we'll nerd out together sometime.
I would love that, but I wanted to touch on something that is very important. And it's very important to describe this because this is the basis of, in many ways, what we see as what we call success. And most people have not related it to this way, but they will after I explain it. What you developed on your own, without money and without business, is mastery. Now, when you evolve a person to where they can create mastery in their life at one thing, they can create it at anything. So for you, it was the work you did. You published a book, you wrote a story, it was your passion. For me, it's my photography. I am a astro landscape photographer, and my work is done in foreign countries mostly, not always, but in foreign countries. And it's usually, not always, but usually in exotic locations of the night sky.
This is gorgeous.
Thank you.
This is phenomenal. I love every single one of these.
Thank you. That's just the top level gallery of what is much deeper. And everything I shoot goes into this gallery at MitchRussoTravels.com.
Mitch, I want to hang some of these in my office. I'm serious. I'm not joking.
That'd be my pleasure.
I am a total enthusiast when it comes to this. Thank you for showing me this.
Yes.
So let's talk about that. You have. I want to get to where we're telling your hero's journey in a minute.
Yeah.
But you touched on something that's fascinating to me, and it's this concept of jack of all trades, which I hate that term. I don't like it at all, because to me that's jack of all trades, master of none. And so I put new language in my life, and I said, you know what? I'm not going to be a jack of all trades. I'm going to be a master of variety, because I have a strong need for variety in my life.
Me too.
With everything.
Yes.
Except my wife.
Yeah. She'll be happy to hear that.
She's happy to hear that.
Yeah.
But she's such a wonderful woman, and such a wonderful presence in my life that I'm always guessing, right? So she creates that variety.
That's wonderful.
And we have a beautiful relationship. And so I tried to find examples of who else is a master of variety that is really well known. And Leonardo da Vinci is one that I could think of that's just like, so that's when I see you, like, I think you're this, now I know you're a masterful business person, you are an author, you're a photographer, and this is all kind of coming together for me in a really cool way as I get to know you, because of what you just said. When you create mastery in one area of your life, you can create it in another. That's not a concept that I would have ever thought possible, just because of the time it takes to achieve mastery in one thing.
But remember, it goes back to what I said earlier. It comes from passion. It doesn't come from hard work without passion. I don't think that's possible to create something out of hard work without passion. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe people have done it. I could never do it. All I know for certain is that I get obsessed with something when I love it, whether it's a person or whether it's a topic or whether it's an idea. And to me, that's beauty. I cultivate beauty in my life because it's one of the most life-giving things to me in my spiritual life, in my physical life. And I didn't always have that. I didn't grow up with that. And
why do you think you appreciate beauty so much? And I'm going to pour a little bit more. I know you've got a trip, but but I won't pour for you because I don't want to be suggestive.
No, it's okay. I love the fact that you brought this, and I'm enjoying it so much.
Well, that's me, sir. I was looking for an opportunity to share this with somebody, and in our conversations, I thought this might just work out for us.
This is perfect. This is so perfect. If you like, I could start to tell you a little bit about my years growing up.
I would love to.
So I grew up in the 60s. And in the 60s, if you, I'm sure, are familiar with the term sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Well, I've imbibed in all three. I had a rock and roll band in high school. It turned out that, once again, I got obsessed. That rock and roll band started in my basement.
What did you play?
I played lead guitar.
You did?
Yeah. And that band became one of the top grossing high school bands in the area.
Wow. What area was it?
The Brooklyn, Sheepshead Bay, Manhattan Beach, Brighton Beach area. And the reason I did is because I understood the concept of focus. So I remember one time, we were enjoying us kids were sitting in the basement, we're smoking dope, we're playing guitar. It's a lot of fun. It feels so good. It sounds great. One day I said, let me turn on the tape recorder. And I recorded an entire hour of our messing around, and I played it back to the group, and they said, wow, we really suck, don't we? I said, yeah, we do. We really suck.
Yeah.
And I said to these guys, would you like to really have a band, or you just want to play around?
Good question.
And they said, no, we really want to have a band. So I said, okay, would you be willing to not get high during band practice? One day, I don't know about that. But I said, look, that's the rules. If you want to have a band, we have to take this seriously. No getting high during band practice. So the other thing that started to happen is that once we got started, no getting high, everyone wanted to play 7 songs because it's more fun to play 7 than 1. I said, no, we're going to focus on 1 song until we get it good. Not perfect, but good. So that became the second mantra of the group. Now we're going to focus on get one thing really, really good. Then we'll go on to the second song. And then the third song, until finally we had a playlist of about 14 songs. Now, 14 songs, back then you could make a song last for 15 minutes. That was long enough to actually play a gig.
Wow.
And then we could jam a little bit, which was also fun too.
Original songs, and maybe do a few covers here and there.
Well, we did mostly covers. We weren't that original. But anyway,
Okay.
So bottom line is, the next thing you know, we're actually enrolling in battles of the bands, which they used to do in high school. So we would go to these battles of the bands, and we would always lose to the same band. There was a band by the name of Dark Carnival.
What was the name of your band?
Absolutely Free. So Absolutely Free was the name of Frank Zappa's first album, is The Mothers of Invention. I was obsessed with Frank Zappa.
Okay.
I took the subway down to Manhattan and hung outside the Cafe Wah to see if I could get a glimpse of him. And he was giving out albums for free called Absolutely Free.
No way. Wow.
So I said, okay, we have to name the band. How about Absolutely Free? Well, this became a sales problem later in life.
Oh, it did.
Because mothers would call up and say, well, yeah, we're looking for a band, but man, your prices are great. Absolutely Free sounds. I said, no, sorry, but that's the name of the band. It's not the actual price. So anyway, we started to go to these battles of the bands, and we kept losing to Dark Carnival. Because the lead guitar player was a musical genius. He, on demand, could play any style of any rocker and it was really remarkable. But the only downside of him, of course, was that he was a heroin addict. And one day, it turns out he died.
We did.
He died of an overdose, and we lost him. I didn't know him very well. He wasn't from my school, but he was a remarkable guitar player. Then we started to win. It's because once Dark Carnival was eliminated, we were always the second best. And by the way, one thing I had this dream I'd be a rock star. But I had this realization during this time. My realization was I actually have no talent whatsoever, but I can learn something and duplicate it. So all of our work was covers. Everything we played was a cover.
So wouldn't that be a talent, though? Your talent would be able to learn something and cover it, isn't that?
Well, I could go to school at Juilliard Music, learn something and replay it, and I'd end up at the Holiday Inn on Thursday nights. But if I had original music, I could potentially play in a stadium.
Okay.
So the difference between, this goes back to the lessons of life, the difference between mediocre and very special, particularly superior, is originality and creativity. And that comes from spirit, that comes from inside. That doesn't come from study, that doesn't even come from hard work. It just comes from the inside. But if you have the passion, that invokes the spirit to create. And that to me is, as much as I love playing the guitar, part of it is I realized I'd never really make any money as a musician.
Yeah.
And I was driven at that age by wanting better things. I grew up in a nice house.
I had the same realization when I was in college and I declared my major. My advisor, my counselor, who was also my theater professor, he said, Jeremy, is there anything else you would rather do besides theater? Meaning like this is the time to declare that.
Right.
And I said, no, this is what I want to do. I wanted to have a good time. I wanted to, do what I was gifted at, and I wanted to use that time growing that gift and using that and sharing that. But if he'd have said, all right, Jeremy, did you know that the average wage of the working actor is $16,000 a year?
If you're lucky.
I would have probably changed my major because
Right.
that's ultimately what happened. I pursued a creative career. I was in Los Angeles. I was on my journey, to achieve that.
Yes.
And my priorities changed because I had a kid.
Sure.
And I didn't want to drag my wife and my kid through that lifestyle. And so I decided to keep my creative habits to myself and apply them to business.
That's wonderful. And we were on the same pathway. But unfortunately, there was a dark side to me and to this story. I had a lot of family problems in life. My mother and father had a very, very difficult and very abrasive divorce. And it affected us kids much more than we
How old were
realized.
you when this occurred?
Just 13.
Okay.
And so I found my way into the boys' room at high school, where eventually I began shooting heroin.
Wow.
So one day I went in there to get high like I did every day, and there was nobody with any pot, but there was a guy with dope, and it was free. Hey, want Want to try some of this stuff? It's called Smack. It's really good. I said, yeah, sure, whatever.
It was needles.
Needles. No, at first it was snorting.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
ooh, yeah, that's cool.
Because that's a big transition to a needle, isn't it? I mean,
Well, yeah, but see, the thing is, is that once you snort it, and this is the thing about heroin that I think a lot of people don't understand. The best experience you ever have on heroin is the first time.
okay.
And the reason is it's completely euphoric.
Okay.
And in a very, it's sort of like, imagine pouring warm maple syrup over your entire body while you're completely immersed in complete relaxation. That's the feeling of heroin in your body for the first time. Every time after the first time, you're trying to recreate the feeling of the first time.
Okay.
So, you know, the second, third, fourth time of snorting, I wasn't getting that anymore.
Okay.
Guys, well, no, yeah, of course you're not. You got to shoot it this time.
Oh.
I don't know if I want to shoot it. Well, it's really easy. Just pop it in your arm, and that's it. All right, give it a try. Well, before you long, that wasn't working as well. Now I had to mainline it right into the vein. So for me, the band now was getting to be very successful. We would go out, and every weekend we would have a gig. And it took some marketing to do this. So part of my journey in building my rock band was the same steps that I used later to build my software company. So what meant is that every time we had a little gig, and that would be a Sweet 16, I'd bring a clipboard and a pencil and ask Mom to write a testimonial. So I would get the testimonial from Mom, and I'd bring it to the mimeograph machine and copy it and paste it up in the supermarket and say, we play for local parties, we have a rock band, the kids love us, and dance music, etc. And so I started using publicity. Then one day I got the idea, well, why don't I send this into the local newspaper? Who knows, maybe they'll mention it. No, they printed it entirely. They printed the whole thing. So next thing I know, I'm learning that PR is a thing and it could work. So this went on, and we started charging $500 an event at one point.
Wow.
I mean, remember now, so I'm talking about 1969.
Yeah.
1970. I mean, this is like a lot of money.
You bet.
And it was all going into my arm. And my parents were unaware. They were too busy fighting. I mean, they were too busy really in battle with each other. And so this really came down to a particular Thursday when I went into the bathroom and I was looking for Touche. Touche was my dealer.
Okay.
And I said, is Touche around? And Touche comes out of one of the stalls and says, yeah, I can help you. What do you need? I said, I want to get a nickel bag for, to get high. He goes, yeah. Here, I have something special for you. And $5, he gives me the bag. It's a little glassine envelope this big. And I tuck it into my wallet. And I said to myself, I'm going to hold out. It's Thursday, remember. I'm going to hold out till Saturday after band practice before I shoot this. Because I want it to last. And you know, it's expensive. $5 is the price. I could buy a piece of clothing for $5 back then, you know. So anyway, I put this in my wallet, but it burnt a hole in my mind until that particular moment on Saturday afternoon. So Saturday afternoon, band practice is over. Everybody leaves my house. I'm alone. I reach into the ceiling and I grab the metal box with all my gizmos in it, and I set it up on the table in front of me. And what I did is I reached into my wallet and I got the glassine bag. Now I have a bottle cap with a bobby pin, so it's like a little pot and a handle. And I then went to the sink and pulled a syringe full of water, and I pumped it into the bottle cap, and I put a piece of cotton in there, and then I tapped the powder in. I think I waited until I put the cotton in after the powder, and I boiled it with a bent match. And then I drew the solution up into the needle, and I tied my arm off, and I slapped my arm to get a vein. And I picked this up, and I'm just about to plunge it into my arm when the phone rang. And so I said, who's calling us? And I put the needle down, I pick up the phone, and I say, hello, hello, and all I'm getting is. So it wasn't like it was dead. It kept clicking. And I said, hello, hello. And I thought somebody was trying to get through. I kept saying, hello. And so finally I said, this has got to be some technical thing, and I hung up. I picked the needle back up, and I went to tap it to get the air bubble out. And the needle was frozen solid. And at that moment, I realized what had happened. I had received counterfeit heroin. They were using rat poison. And they were doing this to the dealers in school to try and get them out of the network. So
Who was doing it?
the mob.
Okay.
The mob in New York.
Why didn't they want the dealers in school? Because they didn't want
Because
kids?
competition.
Oh.
Yeah. And so the bottom line is that I was sold rat poison without knowing it. And because it cooled, it was no longer liquid. And I could not inject it into my arm. And I had this realization, because I was warned about this. I had this realization, and all of a sudden, I started to cry. And it was as if my entire world came down to two decisions. I said, do I decide to continue to get high and be a junkie and be dead? Or do I go in the opposite direction and stop using heroin and choose life and become a productive human being? And I cried for 20 minutes because I realized that I had just averted death that was basically prevented by this phone call. So I'll ask you, who called me?
Well, who do you think called you?
I know who called me.
Who called you?
God.
Yeah. So I'm Jesus is my Savior. I believe that He died on the cross for our sins. And when you talk about this energy, I never impose my beliefs on other people, but when I feel that heaviness in my spirit and that conviction, that's the Holy Spirit. I believe that's the Holy Spirit working through me, and I like to call it what it is.
Yeah.
And I like to give credit to the Holy Spirit because He's a gentleman and He will not come where He's not invited.
Yes.
And for me, that's what it is. And I'll stand in agreement with you that there was an absolute divine
intervention.
So what meaning did you assign to that? And maybe not even in that moment, but even now as you ponder it, what meaning do you assign to that?
It was pretty clear to me. I saw in that moment, I saw that there was this intervention, and then I realized that was not an accident. It couldn't have been. The timing was absolutely too perfect. And I immediately made the decision that I would no longer ever do heroin again. Now, back then as a kid, my logic wasn't entirely perfect, so I said, well, I can still smoke pot, but I'm just never going to do heroin again. And I didn't. And but what ended up happening later, without telling the entire circumstances, my mother that summer found my little gizmo box that was in the ceiling, and she retrieved me from summer camp and brought me to a psychiatric center in New York City. And I was very, very lucky because there was a man there, a very spiritual, very aware individual. His name was Dr. Dan Casriel. He's now gone. But he created a brand new form of therapy for addicts. And it was called primal therapy or scream therapy. And my mother brought me for a consultation. And when I went into that office, it was like, tell us what's going on. And my mother spoke first. And Dan Casriel, Dr. Casriel, listened. And he says, well, I'm about to ask your son what he thinks is going on. But I want to explain to you up front that every word out of his mouth will be a lie. And my mother said, what do you mean? He goes, well, your son is an addict. And addicts lie. They can't help it. It's not a choice, and don't be offended. But every single thing I ask him, his answer will be a lie. Let me show you. He turns to me and he says, so, Mitch, are you still using? And I said, no, I'm not. And he goes, see what I mean? He's an addict. Of course he's still using. He may not be using drugs, he may not be using heroin, but he's still using drugs. And the man was right. I mean, the bottom line is that was who I was at that time. Even though I stopped using heroin, it's like a dry drunk. You know, I stopped using heroin, but I was still an addict.
Yeah.
And my mother made the decision on the spot to leave me there. So that we came in my mom's car, we were going to be for a 1-hour appointment. Next thing I know, I lived there.
How long were you there?
18 months.
18 months.
Right. Now, I never left the building for the first 6 months. After that, there were phase 2 as you go out and you explore, you get to do things, privileges. Phase 3 is you go out and get a job, And anyway, make a long story short, it was absolutely the hardest thing I ever did in my life. And people say, oh my God, how did you? The bottom line is that I was so grateful by the time that was done. I emerged an 18-year-old clean, sober, focused human being with a direction in life to make something of myself. My friends were still smoking pot behind school. They were still working in the record store, which is like low-end job you can get. Mm-hmm. They were still bouncing around. I was focused.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to create something. And
what did you do with it? What did you do with that paradigm shift and that energy and the fact that you knew that God loved you enough?
That's right.
To just intervene.
Right.
I mean, how special is that?
That's how I felt. I felt so special.
You did?
Yes.
That's
I felt
great.
like I could not waste it. It was so, I said, I have to do something with this.
Yeah.
I'm here for a reason.
Yes.
I don't know why.
Yes.
I don't know where to go with it. But I was told when I graduated my drug rehab program that the reason I graduated is because I had met the qualifications for graduation. I had a girlfriend, a place to live, and a job. Therefore, you're sober and you should be happy. Well, 3 months out of the program, I was miserable. I was not happy. I had thoughts that were thinking to myself, drugs were better than this.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I was not having fun. This was a shitty low-end job.
Yeah.
I had a girlfriend who I didn't really like that much.
Yeah.
She was fine and all. Back then you're driven by more than hormones more than anything else.
Sure, yeah.
And the place I lived was really, a basement little room. I mean, so life wasn't very good, and I'm contemplating life, and I get on the subway. It's the middle of August. New York City subways were not air conditioned back then, and I'm sitting there in the subway and I'm sweating, and there's something under my seat, and I don't know what it is. And I don't even know what possessed me, but I reach under, and there's a crumpled piece of paper that I'm sitting on. I open up this piece of paper, and it says, "Free lecture tomorrow night, how to use your mind to control your environment and your destiny." I said, wow, free? That's like what I can afford, free.
Yeah.
And it's tomorrow night, and I'm right around the corner from where I work.
Okay.
So I decided to go. And I go to this free lecture, and I'm sitting there for 3 hours with my mouth gaping open, like, oh my God. And here's this man, very matter-of-factly, talking about the things he does by simply using his mind. And I said, I gotta learn how to do this. This is what I'm looking for.
What kinds of things? Like,
I can control the time of day that I wake up every day, anytime I want. I can control the outcome of the situations I'm in by programming them in advance. I could control how other people treat me by using my mind. Later, I came to find out that I could actually heal other people by using my mind too.
interesting.
So this program was called the Silva Method by Jose Silva. Back then it was called Silva Mind Control,
Okay.
which the name was changed for obviously reasons. Nobody wants to, hear about mind control, but it really was mind control.
Yeah.
You're controlling your own mind.
Mm-hmm.
$200 of saving all summer long to take this course.
Wow.
And I was just barely 18 years old, and I worked 5 days a week, and then 2 weekends in a row, all day Saturday, all day Sunday. I sat in that room from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. for the next 2 weekends. But I learned exactly what I wanted.
Wow.
And now this one-dimensional life that I had before was completely different.
Wow.
And I didn't know what it was. I didn't care what it was. I didn't doubt it worked, so I just listened and followed instructions. So you know how when if you doubt what somebody says and they tell you what to do, you go, I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound real. It's like a black box options trading. Not for me.
Yeah.
Well, this I said, I'll do it. Whatever it is, it seems like it's exactly what I want.
Yeah.
But they didn't call it this, but what it was learning to meditate. So you would go to what they called the alpha state, and then from the alpha state, you could use suggestions to program your mind. So in the alpha state, I could say, this is what I want to happen.
You're in a meditative state to
Yes.
achieve the alpha state.
Exactly.
Is this like kind of sort of like as you're falling asleep, this sort of alpha state?
Yes.
Is that where it is?
Well, the alpha state is a relaxed state. It's not falling asleep. Delta is closer to falling asleep.
Okay.
So there's alpha, beta, and then delta. And then there's a theta state too, which is much lower.
Okay.
So the point is that this, what he had clued into, Jose Silver, is that the frequency of your brain waves actually allows you to do things at different levels. So he called it going to your level. And I was able to go to my level very quickly after a while. I could go to my level in 30 seconds. Usually it would take 10 to 15 minutes in the beginning. But in 30 seconds, I could go to my level, and I could open up my programming screen, and I could create my future, which became very useful to me.
What kind of future did you build for yourself?
Well, initially my future was relatively simple. I just wanted to get a better job. I wanted to get a better girlfriend.
Yeah.
I wanted to get a better place to live. And,
Yeah.
and I started postulating these things. And I noticed that the more I postulated them in my state, my alpha state, the sooner they would come to me.
You were focusing on basic necessity items
At
at
the
that point.
beginning.
Security, right?
Security.
Shelter.
Exactly.
Relationships,
Yes.
connection, and provision.
Right.
So how did that evolve?
Well, what evolved is I said I need more education.
Okay.
I barely had a high school education, and I needed more education.
Okay.
And so I went back to my mother and I said, Mom, I need to go to college, I guess. I don't know. And so she said, well, why don't we enroll you in New York University? It's right in Manhattan. And we were in Brooklyn at the time. So I enrolled in New York University, and I hated it. I spent a year learning everything I didn't want to learn.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I was passionate about electronics, computers. As a little boy, I won science fairs because I would build circuits, and I told you I'm a complete nerd.
Yeah.
So I would build these things and enroll them in the science fair, and I'd win. And the bottom line was that that's what I felt like my life would be. So I ended up dropping out of 2 universities, 2 colleges. And my mother said, well, now what? What do you want to do? And she said, well, what do you really want to do? And I had this moment in time when I said, Mom, do you remember Arnie? Arnie used to come to the house when we were kids. He would fix our TV. I loved Arnie. I think I'd like to fix color TVs. And she goes, honey, if you want to fix TVs, I'm going to send you to the best TV repair school in the
How
world.
about that?
That was my mother. My mother was my advocate in every level.
That's great.
And so she sent me to DeVry Technical Institute for Television Repair.
She did.
Yes. And I went there with total enthusiasm. And she said to me, if you pass with all A's, I'm going to give you a plane ticket to anywhere you want to go. And that was a big incentive for me back then because I wanted to go to San Francisco.
She knew you well, didn't she?
She did. And so I got straight A's in every class. And I learned how to fix color TVs. And what I noticed about what I was then using a lot of the skills I learned from the Silva method. I was able to visualize television, insides of television, so I didn't have to memorize circuitry. I could just walk through them. So I could actually instantly, 3-dimensionally visualize the inside of a television circuitry system and then walk through it and do anything I wanted. Well, we get to the final class before graduation, and it was a weird class. It was called Digital Electronics. I'll remind you of the year here. It's like 1971, maybe 72. Everybody knows TVs are made from tubes. What the heck would digital electronics have to do with anything?
Yeah.
So I took the course. I figured might as well get it. It shouldn't be that hard. So I'm in the course and I'm enjoying, the lectures. And by the 3rd session, the teacher calls me up. He says, Russo, stay after. I want to talk to you. So he reaches into his briefcase and he pulls out this big, thick mother book and plops it on the table. He says, take this home, read chapters 1 and 2, and do the exercises at the end of the chapter. I said, okay. And, I had some guys waiting for me, so I grabbed the book, I put it in my backpack, and I left. And I get home and I'm reading this book and oh, this is amazing. This is like digital logic. I love this. So I'm now studying it. I'm doing the exercises. And I brought it back the next day and I handed him the assignment and I gave him the book back. I said, thanks a lot. That was really good. He goes, what do you mean? Take the book. Now I want you to do chapter 3 and do the exercise. And he kept me at this the entire term.
He did.
Yeah. So at the end of the term, I said, wow, man, this was fantastic. I really loved it. I really got it. It was so cool. And I started doing some circuit designs and showing him, and he loved it. And then he looked at me and he said to me, Russo, you will never fix a color television set in your entire life.
What?
And I said, what do you mean? I just went to school for color television repair. He goes, no, my friend, you're going into the computer business.
Wow.
I said, why do you say that? He goes, do you know what you just did? I said, I have no idea. What did I just do? He goes, you've completed year 1 and 2 of MIT's Digital Electronic Design course.
Oh.
I said, why didn't you tell me? I would have been intimidated.
Exactly.
So bottom line is he was right.
Wow.
I was immediately recruited out of that school by a computer company.
Wow.
And I went to work for Data General, defunct now, and I was promised the world. And I was put on an assembly line on the night shift.
So you were.
And on the assembly line, my job was to take a cardboard box and put it over a computer mainframe and time the amount of time it took until the computer overheated and failed.
Destructive for a creative mind.
Right.
To do the monotonous.
Right.
To do the minutia. To do the over and over and over and over again.
So I couldn't stand it. One of my jobs was if a computer failed, I had to take a test meter pin by pin and test 200 pins on the back of a computer backplane to see if one of them was not connected. So I did this for about a week and I said, this is
I
ridiculous.
was going to ask you, how long did this last?
Well, I had to do it. It was my job.
Yeah.
But then I said, you know what? I'm going to design a circuit that scans all of the pins and lights up an LED when the circuit is broken. So in my own time, in my kitchen table, I built a test board for computer backplanes.
Oh my gosh.
So I brought it back to work, and now it was time for me to go through it. I just plugged in my board, I clicked the on button, and it went boop, boop, boop. And I said, okay, and I marked the car, and I sent it back. Another one comes through, boop, boop, boop. I marked it, I sent it back for repair. I wanted to repair it myself, but they wouldn't let me. Finally, somebody from upstairs, the engineering department, comes up to me and goes, what are you doing here? I said, what do you mean? He goes, I was reprimanded, by the way, for doing that. He says, what do you think you're doing? You were never told to do that. I said, yeah, but you should take what I did and give it to everybody.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll help you. I'll help you. I have the schematics for it. I could just show you how to build it. Let's build them.
Good job for standing up for yourself and for casting a vision to your supervisor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was beaten down. I said, so the guy comes up to me, goes from the engineering department. He says, yeah, I know what you did. He goes, you don't belong here. I said, oh, here, I want you to call this guy up and talk to him. He's going to talk to you about your future. So I want to explain right now that my life has always been driven, and my life has been guided. I've never sought much. Things have shown up that it's like stepping onto a stone in a pond and not knowing where the next stone was. And I just said, I have confidence that the stone will show up. I learned that. And so I pick up this phone number and I call the guy up. I said, engineer Bob told me to give you a call. He goes, oh yeah, he told me about you. He sets me up with an interview at Digital Electronics, which was across the pond at Maynard, Massachusetts, at the mill. And so I show up, and I'm sitting in this office with this guy. And I distinctly remember that day because I ended up with a splitting headache, and I maybe because of nervousness or whatever. And I was too embarrassed to ask for aspirin or anything. I just sat there with this massive headache.
Wow.
And this guy gave me a grueling interview, and then he passed me on to 3 other engineers.
Oh no.
And this didn't stop for 4 hours. So part of me loved it because these were questions that I could answer.
Yeah.
And at the end of the interview, I said, do I have the job? He goes, you can't get out of here. You're ours. There's no way we're letting you go. And
how did you feel?
I was like blown away because this was not a job that I should have had. I was hired to be a junior engineer inside the R&D labs of a computer company.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to know my degree is in fixing color television sets. So how did I end up here, right?
Yeah.
So then he says to me, I said to him, well, why would you choose me? You have people coming out of college with electrical engineering degrees.
Yeah.
He goes, yeah, well, none of them understand this as you do. I said, what do you mean? He goes, well, they may have learned the theory of it, but you have the practical experience. Mm. Now, I've written articles back then as a kid, for pleasure. I wrote articles for Byte magazine on how to write computer games. I mean, I was a nerd with capital N. And this was I loved electronics. I was very introverted. I liked girls conceptually, but they were too scary. I didn't want to go up to them. Yeah. So I preferred to just sit in my apartment and build circuits.
We would have hung out, just so you know.
I would.
When if we were in the same place back then at the same age, that you're describing all the friends that I had. Absolutely.
So I took this amazing job, and about 2 years into the job, the chief of the department. Now I'm staying late every night, and I'm debugging circuit boards. And Gordon Bell, the head of engineering for all of Digital Equipment Corporation, wanders around the lab 10 o'clock at night one night, comes up and he says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, there's a ringing on these memory lines. We're getting ringing, and it's giving us errors on these memory chips." Now, no one ever heard of a memory chip before. It was a new invention from a company called Mostek. They were designing mainframes with iron cores and using magnetic charges to store information. And they were going to release the amazing VAX 11780, their greatest achievement ever, with magnetic core memory. But this ragtag group of engineers said, no, we're going to use these brand new integrated circuits called digital RAM. And we're going to replace all the magnetic cores with faster, smaller, lower heat versions of semiconductors. And Mitch, you were on the team with Bob, the engineer. And I said, great. So he designed them and I debugged them. And I learned so much. And I was in the engineering lab at 10 o'clock and Gordon Bell walks by and he says to me, "What are you doing?" And I showed him the oscilloscope. I said, "Look, we're getting ringing on. I got to damp these lines with a small resistor or else we're going to get errors."
Yeah.
He goes, "That's a great idea. Just submit this changes to the spec and we'll go into design review and we'll take a look at it." So I said, "What's design review?" He goes, "Well, every Friday we have a design review. You should come." I said, "I'm not allowed to come. I'm not an engineer." He goes, "Oh no, I'll tell your engineer. I'm a junior engineer. I work for you. You'll come." So I go in the room, and all these men are sitting around, brilliant men, and they're all very cordial to each other until the meeting starts. Then they're ripping each other to pieces.
Really?
Yeah. "Hey, you moron, what the hell are you doing there?" And so the bottom line is, I was terrified.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and then finally one of them turns to me and says, "Mitch, explain what you showed us in the lab about the ringing," and I did. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, I'm going to get hit. I know it's coming. But they were so appreciative that I had found this because nobody understood what was going on.
Wow.
Because no one would look. So then I said to Gordon Bell at 10 o'clock at night, I said, we could take the essence of a computer on a single board and put it into a VT100 terminal and turn it into a personal computer. And he looked at me and he goes, "Why would we do that?" I said, well, it could be great. You could have a self-contained computer on somebody's desk. He goes, nobody would want that. And he walked away. Okay.
You pitched to the wrong dude.
I did. Yeah, of course, he's a mainframe guy, right?
That's like the guy who passed on Tom Cruise.
Right, exactly.
He's like, man.
Well, I mean, it didn't take long. The world woke up, and then, of course, personal computers became real.
Yeah.
But that was basically my life, and I went on to be, I was plucked out of that job again and again and again until eventually I ended up working for a semiconductor company directly. So I was in an engineering job designing a multi-point smoke detector microprocessor-based system of which I was programming myself. There was nobody to help me. Nobody knew what it was. I was kind of inventing it as I went along. And one of the engineers from the semiconductor company comes in and says, "What are you doing?" I show him, and he goes, "Yeah, why aren't you using a compiler and an assembler language? And you should get a development station." I said, "What's a development station?" He goes, "I'm going to bring one to you on Friday." So he brings one to me on Friday, and I'm like blown away. I can speed up my work 10 times with this thing. It's like adding AI today, you know?
Yeah.
And so I start to work with this thing, and I'm totally blown away. And I'm like now tripling my output when, by learning this code. And he pulls me over. He goes, "Can I take you to lunch?" I said, "Sure." He says, "Look, I know you like your job, but we could use a guy like you. You want to come work for us?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm kind of passionate about this job." He goes, "Well, let me talk to my superiors. I'll come back on Monday and I'll see what I can do." So he comes back on Monday and he asked me to lunch again, and I said, "Sure." He says to me, "Well, I have a job offer for you, but it's not the money I hoped I could get for you." And I was making a solid $17,000 a year at the time. That was enough for me to have a car, an apartment, spending money. I mean, honestly, I felt like I was on top of the world.
Yeah.
So he says, "The best I could do is I could get you $65,000 a year. And of course there'd be a $10,000 bonus if. And I'm sitting there going, "Mitch, shut up. Don't say a word. Don't move your mouth. Do not squint. Do not." And I said,
Don't twitch.
"Right.
No eye twitch.
Right. Try not to." And he looked at me, and I'm completely still, and he goes, "I did my best." And I said, It's okay. Can I have a day to think about it?" So I said, "Okay." And he called me next day. He goes, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I think I'm going to take your offer." So
Congratulations.
Now, yeah, congratulations. So now I realized at this moment in time that I had far more money, about to have far more money than I ever dreamed of.
Yeah.
So I called up my accountant, my friend, and I said, "Ray, what do? I have this big amount of money." He goes, "Well, you have to shelter it." He goes, "You're gonna have to buy yourself like a condominium and live in it, because now you could have a tax deduction."
That's good advice.
So I started looking at condominiums. They were ridiculously expensive, like $60,000 for a condominium. I said, "Shit."
In New York?
No, in Boston.
In Boston?
I said, I could buy like a building for
Yeah.
this. So I shifted my view. Instead of a condominium, I'm going to buy a multi-family unit. So I started looking around, and I found a building for, the guy was asking $80,000. It was a 4-unit building, basement apartment, 3 floors. And I knew if I bought it, I would have to live in it, which was fine with me. That was actually perfect.
Yeah.
And I called the phone number. I said, I'd like to get a tour of the building you're selling. So I drive to a very seedy area of Boston called Charlestown, and I found the address. And it's like a neighborhood you would not want to find yourself in.
Yeah.
And it's basically, the address is a bar. And I said, I'm here to see Mr. Sullivan. And he says, yeah, go through the bar, go around the back. There's a glass door. It's not marked. Just walk upstairs. So I look around. And I'm a very timid person back then. A small guy. I walk through, and there's all these big guys drinking beer and screaming at the TV and all that.
Yeah.
So I walk to the glass door, and I go upstairs, and there's another glass door. It says his name on the door, and I knock on the door. He says, "Come in." And I walk in, and this fat cigar-smoking guy behind the desk. And he says, "Yeah, you're the one interested in the building, right?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, what do you want to know?" And I asked him some questions about the condition and this and that. And he said, "All right, my guy Bobby's going to give you a tour of the building." So we went and took a tour, came back. He goes, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I'd like to buy the building, but it's too expensive." He goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, here's the math." And I had all the math on a sheet of paper.
You did.
Yeah. I said,
Of
"Well,
course
look."
you did.
Yeah. Look, it's 17.5% interest rate. So if I took a mortgage, I'd have to pay this much per month. Here's the maintenance. Here's the insurance. So I'm going to be underwater immediately if I buy this building at this price.
Yeah.
I said, "The only way I could do this is at this price." And he looks at me and goes, "Well, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to sell it at that price." I said, "Well, there's nothing more I can tell you. Look, I'm a working guy. I don't have a lot of cash. I mean, I have enough cash to do this deal, but I don't have a lot of cash." So he looks at me and he goes, "You remind me a lot of me. And I like you. But I'm going to sell you this building, but I ask one favor." I said, "Sure, what's the favor?" He goes, "There's an old couple living on the first floor. All I want you to do is not throw them out. You can raise their rent when you would raise everybody else's rent in a fair way, but you can't throw them out." Deal. So I buy the building.
Wow. What'd
Now,
you end up getting it for?
I ended up getting it for something like $72,000.
Okay.
And at that point, I move into the building, and I had, I would call it a nice used car. And I come out the next morning, and my car has eggs on it, and I have urine all over the vestibule of my new building, and I realized it must be the kids or whatever.
Yeah.
So I come downstairs. I go to the back to get a bucket and a mop and to clean everything up, and all of a sudden, there's a knock on the door. And I open up the door. I have to go downstairs, open the door, and there's two young men. One of them looks like they've been badly beaten up. They said, Mr. Russo, it was us who did this to your building. We have to apologize. I'm really sorry. But Mr. Sullivan told us we should come here and clean it up. And so please give us the mop. And would you allow us to please clean it up? So here's what I didn't know. I had purchased the building from the head of the organized crime, the Irish organized crime in the town of Charlestown.
No way.
But he became my protector.
Wow.
So later, when that old couple, he died, she was a lovely woman. We got her groceries, we took out her garbage because we liked her. She was nice. Well, she fell asleep with a cigarette on the couch and the building started to burn. I was trapped in the second floor. I almost burned in the building. I kicked out a window and was able to escape. And then all of a sudden now, Mr. Sullivan comes along with a crew, says, we'd like to rebuild your building. And I said, sure, but you got to give me a bid. I got other bids. I had an adjuster come, you know that whole story.
Yeah.
So the adjuster comes and he gives me this whole thing. And I mean, I've never had any experience like this before. Next thing I know, I'm flooded with people. Like the night of the fire, I'm flooded with people who want to be my adjuster. I don't even know what an adjuster was.
Yeah.
So finally, I found one guy I liked. I selected him, and he was my adjuster. And we chose Sullivan's group to do the work. Well, he did a great job. And then I had to live at a Holiday Inn for 7 weeks while they did the work. But the work was completed, and I just basically got a brand new building.
Wow.
So the building was completely rebuilt. Insurance not only paid for all the rebuilding, but actually ended up with a $10,000 surplus. So for me, and back then that was like really big money. So I ended up with all my living expenses paid and a $10,000 surplus and a brand new building. And was able to rent it at higher rents than I had before.
Do you still have the building?
No. So what started to happen was I then decided I was going to buy another one. And so I bought another 3-decker in the Charlestown area. And that was a difficult experience. I was a self-managing landlord, and I had a scammer come in, and she then started to sue me because the dishwasher, you know what I mean? It was a typical scam situation.
Yeah.
And then finally, about 3 years later, the economy was shifting, and my life had evolved to the point where I was ready to leave my job as an engineer and start my own company. So I had this dream, and I evolved that dream while I was working as a salesman for a rep firm. And with that, I made the decision to leave. And with that, I needed money to start my company. So I made the decision to sell all of my real estate and put it into a startup.
Okay, so that's when you were born into entrepreneurship.
Right.
Right then. So you had assets, and you decided you were going to put those on the line and start your own business. So what was that business?
Time Slips Corporation.
Talk about that.
So Time Slips Corporation was a brainstorm that I had while I was still working as a salesman. So working as a salesman, I was representing companies that had electronic components. And these electronic components were handed out to engineers who we'd hope would then use them in a design, and that became a multi-manufacturing. We could sell millions of that particular item. So they needed samples, but I needed to keep track of my samples. And so I had a big sample book, and I had a big schedule and scheduling. So I said, I should be able to use a database of some sort to do this. So I approached a friend of mine, my next door neighbor, and I shared over breakfast that I'm having this problem. And I then, tried to explain to him that, what it really comes down to is I need to keep track of these samples, and I need to keep track of the time. And so we basically said, let's try and help me design a database. And he says, yeah, he'll help me. And then I got a call from from my accountant. He said, that computer you just bought for $6,000 to design your database? He goes, you can't deduct that from your taxes. Wow. I said, why not? He goes, well, the IRS considers that a toy. And I said, wait a minute, it's a business tool. He goes, well, if you could keep, and this is the word, contemporaneous records of its use, then you could deduct it from your taxes. So I said, oh, no problem.
Yeah.
I'll buy a program that will allow it will basically track my activity. And well, there was no such program. So I said, well, if everybody has the same problem and there's no such program, why don't I write a program?
This is Mitch Russo.
Right.
This is you, man.
That's right. So I had this conversation with my next door neighbor in a tiny little restaurant in Essex, Massachusetts, over breakfast. And little did I know that the man I was speaking to had written 5 commercially available software products already, and was in stealth mode in somewhat retirement because he was also a member of a family with $500 million in assets. I didn't know any of this. He was just a wild hippie guy next door to me, just moved in. And so about 3-4 weeks later, he calls me up and says, come on over, I want to show you something. So I go over to his house, and there is this time tracking system that he had mocked up on an Apple II. Now, this was for PCs, but he goes, well, this is what I was thinking. And my jaw dropped. I said, oh my goodness, that's amazing. And I said to him, I think we could sell a few of these. So he said, okay. And then I said to him, so, want to start a company? Now, those words coming out of my mouth shouldn't have even, I didn't even know how to, I had nothing, I didn't know how to start a company. Why did I say that? I don't know. I just saw an opportunity. So he said, yeah. Just as naturally as I asked him the stupid question, he gave me a stupid answer. Yeah. So I said, okay, well, here's what we should do. Let's take $5,000 each, put it in a bank account, and go see an attorney and draw up a partnership agreement.
Good. That's good to do.
Sure. So we did that. And then we took that $5,000 each, that was $10,000, and we bought him a computer to develop this on because he didn't have a PC.
Okay.
So that was already $4,000 of our $10,000, right? So now at this point, he's working away, and I'm still working at my job and still doing my thing. And one day after 6 weeks go by, he calls me up. He goes, come on, I want to show you something. So I go over to his house, and he's sitting in front of the computer, this IBM PC, and he goes, watch this. And he takes his finger and he touches the key, touches the T letter on the key, and a T shows up on the screen. He goes, what do you think? I had this sinking feeling at that point. I said, 6 weeks and you got to display a T on the screen? I said, Neil, that's great. There's a lot to do from here, but that's really great. So really what he was doing was he had learned Pascal, which was the software at the time, and he had created the framework for what was soon to become TaxKick. TaxKick was designed to keep track of your system for taxes. So 6 months we worked nights and weekends. We created the software. We documented the software. And that Thursday night, we decided that Friday we're both going to quit our jobs. So I went into work the next day and I announced to my boss, I'm leaving. He goes, where are you going? I said, I'm starting my own company. He goes, oh, wow, good luck with that. And I was off.
Yeah.
He did the same. And that Monday morning, the two of us showed up at my base. We worked out of the room above my garage. So it was a garage operation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I said, okay, welcome to your new company. He goes, well, what do you want to do now? I said, I don't know. Well, you keep writing the code and I'll figure out how to get some brochures or I don't know. I'll figure something out. And later that day, my accountant called me up because he knew what I was doing. He goes, Mitch, I got some bad news for you. I said, what? He goes, you know that IRS ruling about the contemporaneous records? I said, yeah, that's what we built our entire company on. He goes, they kind of relaxed those rulings. It's not really needed anymore.
No.
So I said, wait a minute. You're telling me that everything we've just done, we've just quit our jobs, we don't need that software anymore? Sorry, Mitch. Have a nice day. Hangs up. So now I'm sitting here going, holy shit, what are we going to do?
Yeah.
So we were angry, we were upset, we were emotional. And I said, okay, wait a minute. We just created something incredible.
Yeah.
Where else can we use this?
Yeah.
And we started thinking about it. And in a matter of hours, we realized here was the question, who could use time tracking to better manage their company, their business, or their job? And immediately the answer was lawyers.
Yeah.
Now, neither one of us was a lawyer. I mean, we were the furthest thing from lawyers possible. He'd been in prison, I mean, or at least arrested for, smoking pot and protesting or something. And I mean, I had no love for lawyers.
But you'd paid enough billable hours to know that lawyers needed to be able to track.
I did.
You'd paid enough bills and you're like, what the heck?
Right.
Half an hour for a phone call? What? Yeah.
So I said to him, well, okay, we have to take what we did and create a time and billing system. He goes, what's that? I said, I don't know, but that's what we need. And so I went to the BU library and I started doing research on legal time and billing software. And I found some old software manuals of software written in COBOL and Fortran. And I borrowed those manuals. And what I got from those was the formats for their bills.
Okay.
And I understood that there were different billing rates for different services.
Okay.
So I went back to Neil and said, okay, this is what we need. We need to add a client list, we need to add a rate table, and we need to produce bills. And he goes, I'm on it. I said, Neil, have you ever written a billing system before? He goes, oh yeah, I've written one for a hairdresser. I said, hairdresser? Yeah, they're about the same. So basically he took 3 months and he came up with the core of what became time slips. Now, our little tax program, we might have sold 20 of them, 50 at the most. We created time slips, and remember now, we had $6,000 left in our bank account, and my brilliant idea was, why don't we take an ad out in PC Magazine? So we took an ad out in PC Magazine, and that ad was beautiful. I have a copy of it hanging in the bathroom of my condo. That ad was so gorgeous. It like encapsulated everything we thought and felt about the software. And we ran it in PC Magazine, all $6,000 to pay for that ad.
Wow.
And we ended up with 3 sales for $99, and that was it. So I said, holy crap, we're dead. And so we were now preparing to go to a trade show in New York City, Legal Tech, and we didn't have any money to get there. Now, Neil could have written a check out of his family, but I had a rule. You can't put any money in unless I can match it, because I don't ever want the ownership of this company to shift. We were 50-50 partners.
Yeah.
So my mother calls me and says, hey, Mitch, how's it going? And I said, oh, it's great, Mom. Everything's great. She goes, no, really, Mitch, how's it going? I said, oh, we're like 15 days from closing the doors. We're totally bankrupt. She goes, don't worry. Everything will work out just fine. That was my mother, right? Well, now I'm saying to Neil, okay, we have to find a way to get to New York. We have no leads. We got to find a way.
Yeah.
Next day, a very rare thing happened. A Federal Express truck shows up in my driveway. Now, remember, at this time of life, Federal Express trucks were really rare.
Yeah.
And to have one come to my house, I didn't know what the heck was going on.
Yeah.
So the guy rings my doorbell, says, I have a package from Mitch Russo, and hands me this envelope, thick envelope. And I said, okay, thank you, and he walks away. And I zip open the top of the envelope, and I look inside, and there's $10,000 in cash.
Wow.
With a note from my mother. She says, hope this helps, love, Mom. So, with that money, we made it to Legal Tech. We had a folding table and a sheet for a booth. That's what we had. And now we're in the room with $1 million booths from major Fortune 500 companies creating and producing legal technology. We had the busiest booth at the show. We immediately had a buyout offer on the spot from a competitor. Of course, we didn't take it.
What made the booth busy? Were you guys out in front of the table hustling people and getting them to stop?
What we had figured out was that the hustling part, hey, would you like to see time slips?
Yeah. That's not an easy thing to do, to get people to show up to your booth at a convention. I mean, I've done that. It's not easy.
I decided that I sucked at that. So what I decided to do instead was I said, you know what? Move the table out of the way, go into the lobby and bring in 12 chairs. We're going to create a classroom. And I said, next class, 3 p.m.
Great.
And now at 3 p.m., everybody showed up.
They did.
And they didn't even know what they were there for.
But it's class. It's education.
Right.
There's value.
Right. So next class, 3 p.m. And then at 3 p.m. I said, let me show you what the law firm of the future looks like.
Brilliant.
You're going to have a computer on your desk and you're going to keep track of time. And we sold like hotcakes off the floor. We ran out of product.
Come on.
We brought 100 copies with us. So now we had sold 100 copies for $99 a copy. And we didn't know what to do with ourselves. We thought we were like insanely happy. This was amazing. So next step was to go to Comdex, the big computer show. So I grabbed another 100 copies of the software, and this is all shrink wrapped in little, packaging.
Mm-hmm.
And I spent 10 days walking 1 million square feet from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, every night. And then I walked 3 miles back to my shitty, cheap motel room somewhere on this edge of town, because I couldn't afford a cab. That would have been out of the question. And I, after walking the entire show till the day it closed, I came home exhausted and deflated because I didn't think I had accomplished a thing.
Mm-hmm.
Without realizing it, I had handed my software to everybody I thought would potentially write about it, like the magazines. I had handed it to one person, my angel, who created a software review in InfoWorld magazine. And when that review ran, it changed the history of my entire company.
It did.
So InfoWorld was known for, if you got a review in InfoWorld that was an 8.5, you could shut your doors. You might as well go home. It was over. That's what they call damning with faint praise. Well, it might be a nice product, but it really isn't ready for prime time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so the highest they ever gave a software product was 9.3. And who did they give that to? Lotus Development Corporation and WordPerfect, the two biggest software companies in the world.
Yeah.
Well, now we found out that we were being reviewed in InfoWorld, and we were terrified. So I'm now like I can't sleep. I don't know what's going on. I don't know when the review is coming out. And then one morning, it was about 5:30, maybe 6 a.m., and we have above the garage, we had AT&T install 6 telephones, and the lines were, they roll over to each phone, and all of a sudden, all 6 phones started ringing. And I go downstairs.
And there was just 2 of you.
No, there was only me. It was 6 a.m. in the morning. I was still in bed. I heard him in my bedroom. It's in my house. So I go downstairs and I said, Timeslips Corporation, may I help you? He said, yes, we'd like to place an order for Timeslips. And all I kept doing, I was sitting there writing since 6 till about 8:30 when Neil came over. I said, Neil, answer the phones, answer the phones.
Yeah, you just answered one.
I kept answering over, and I was answering for hours before Neil came by. And I think I had collected 40, 50 orders at that time, and the phones were still ringing.
Wow.
Well, the big phone call came later that day. It came from a software distributor named Ingram. Ingram is a big book publishing distributor. Ingram says, yes, is this Timeslips Corporation? And I said, yes, it is. And it's just me sitting at it. He goes, we'd like to order 600 copies of your product for distribution. When can those ship?
600 copies.
So we went from selling 6 a week to roughly 600 a week.
Wow.
And it only went up from there.
Wow.
So those were so that was InfoWorld. That one review changed the face of our entire company.
Wow.
And we just kept doubling and doubling and doubling every year. So that's how Timeslips grew. And that became really, I always had this dream that, so I said to Neil, Neil, what do you want out of this company? He goes, well, Mitch, money isn't really my thing. We have a lot of money. I just want to prove to the world, I want to prove to my family that I have value, that I'm not a loser. Because as a kid, the rest of the world said he's the son of a rich man. Why should we ever pay him? So he couldn't even get a job. He'd get a job and they'd say, ha, you want a salary? Come on, your father could buy my business with spare change in his pocket. He wanted to be recognized at being the best of something. He said, Mitch, well, what do you want? I said, I want to be rich. I want to have a financial success. Now, that's how I started.
Yeah.
But I later realized that once I saw that the money was going to happen, I realized this was my vehicle to become a better person. And I studied management, and I studied negotiation, and I studied sales. And I actively took the time to build a network of other software CEOs and created a mastermind without knowing it was called a mastermind. We would just meet in our office every month and discuss our problems and use the group to solve our problems. And so finally, we received an invite. We had a gentleman come to us and say, we'd like to buy your company. And he showed up and with his little posse of people, and we gave him a tour of the company and sat us down, and he says, thank you very much. It was very informative, and we'll let you know. So he goes away, and I said to Neil, what do you think about selling the company? He goes, well, I was going to ask you about that. He goes, how much longer do I have to work? Because he'd never really worked before in his life. But it turns out Neil was the best worker in the whole company. I mean, I worked hard, and I worked really hard, and I mean like 7 days a week, 16 hours a day hard. He worked harder.
Wow.
He was so passionate about this product.
That's the kind of business partner you want.
He was the best business partner and the best friend in the world.
Yeah.
And so when this InfoWorld review came out, I was terrified. I said, Neil was now recognized. By the way, that review, we received a 9.3 rating, the same rating as WordPerfect and Lotus.
Wow.
And the reviewer, the accolades coming through the reviewer was over the top.
Wow.
And I was terrified because the world had now recognized that Timeslips in fact, he called it a jewel of a program.
Wow.
And now I'm thinking, well, Neil was now recognized as one of the best programmers in the world. We're through.
Yeah. Someone's going to hire him and...
No, exactly. And I'm going to be out of a partner. So I said to Neil, Neil, I mean, you've met your goal.
Yeah.
What do you want to do?
Yeah.
And he looked at me, he goes, but you didn't meet your goal. I'm not done until we both meet our goals.
What a guy.
So he stuck with us. And now later, that company came back to us and said, we love what you're doing. And they gave us an offer. They gave us a $5 million buyout offer, which to us back then was a lot of money.
It's a lot of money today.
Right. But they basically said, we're going to decide between you and this one other company. Mm-hmm. So if you're good with the offer, let us know. And I said, yeah, I think we are. So he went out and came back to us a few weeks later. So we decided on buying the other company. I said, fine. That year, we had been experimenting with something called a certification program. So I had this great idea because we were struggling in tech support. We were selling so much software, we couldn't support it. Everything was telephone support. So I had this idea, well, what happens if we train some of our own customers to become experts in our software?
Great idea.
And create a certification program. And Neil said, yep, sounds good to me. Neil and I had a great relationship. Everything related to the software and to the technology was him. Everything else was me. And he trusted me completely. Every month I gave him a bounded financial report so he could review it, even take it back to his family, whatever he wanted to do. I wanted him to totally trust me. Those reports would pile up on the desk. He would never even look at them because he totally trusted me. And I totally trusted him. Well, at this point, we struggled. We built a certification program and we sold tests. If somebody passed the test, they were certified. Well, we sold more tests than we ever dreamed possible. It became a huge revenue stream. But then those people who were passing the test that we called certified were not. And we learned the hard way that when they went out to work with clients, that they were losers. And they were dangerous. And we were getting lawsuits, threatening lawsuits from people about what our certified consultants had done to them.
Wow.
So I canceled the program. I called them back, and then I said, we've got to find out what went wrong. I called every single person who had ever been visited by one of our certified consultants, and I took very, very careful notes, and I digested everything, and I rebuilt the entire certification program from the ground up from everything I learned. And what I learned came down to one simple thing. We didn't have a culture. We never imposed a culture on this group. We made stupid assumptions because everyone's just like you, right? I mean, look, look, I'm just a guy, you're like me, right? I mean, But I was wrong. People were not just like me. People didn't know how to act. They didn't know how to be polite. They didn't know how to dress. They didn't know how to work within in a professional organization. They didn't know how to write a letter. So I had to give them all the letters. I had to teach them to dress. I had to remind them to use mouthwash. I had to literally script what they would do when they got to an office. So
Raise the standard of
Exactly.
the entire industry.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what we did. Then when we relaunched that certification program, that program sold out so fast. We ended up recruiting, testing, training, and certifying 350 people as the Timeslips Certified Consultant Program.
Wow.
Now, in 18 months, the value of our company doubled just from having a certified consultant program. So we were blown away. We were shocked. And now later, that same guy comes back and says, "Yeah, I think we're ready to buy your company." I said, "Well, it's a whole different thing. It's a whole different ball of wax now."
Sorry, pal.
Well, again, when I say we doubled the value of the company, we more than doubled the value of the company. And we ended up selling it to Sage.
Wow.
Sage PLC. And then after that, I realized I was now part of Sage. I was on the board, and I realized, oh my God, I really do hate having a boss. I hate being in a corporation. I not only hate it, I despise it. And as soon as my time was able to, I left. They had made me the chief operating officer of all of Sage US, and I couldn't stay. I hated it. So when I went back, I said, what am I going to do? I have money, but I have no marketable skill. In my mind, I had no marketable skill. Well, I just built a company, so what? Everybody does that.
Yeah.
And I bounced around, didn't know what I was going to do with myself. So I said, you know what? Maybe I'll help others. And that's how I began my coaching business. I started helping other people scale, fund, and then sell their own companies. And I had a lot of fun doing it. And I basically developed sort of a process for how to help others do that. And
create certification programs.
Exactly. And then use these tools. And I wrote a book called Power Tribes about that. And then I was recruited by Tony Robbins and Chet Holmes to become the president of Business Breakthroughs International. And Tony, myself, and Chet created a partnership. And we took that company from almost nothing to nearly 30 million before Chet passed away.
Wow.
And that became one of the greatest learning experiences of my life.
I bet that we could do a whole podcast on that.
Exactly.
I can't wait to do version 2. I know you've got to get to catch a plane.
Oh my God, I sure do.
So
I got to run.
So thanks. I really appreciate you, Mitch. I really do, and I'm inspired by you, and I know everyone who hears this will be.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it, Jeremy. And I'd love to have a version 2 at any point. And again, if anybody would like to reach out or hear more about my story, you can go to mitchrusso.com or mitchrusso360.com, and you could access all of my stuff there.
And we'll put that in the show notes so people can grab it there.
Great.
Okay. Thanks, Mitch.
Thank you.
All right.
Well, a big thank you for listening to the end of our podcast. I know your time is valuable, and I hope you got a few takeaways that are going to help you get a greater return on that time. I know you will. And if you did enjoy it, I'd sure appreciate a share or a comment. Feel free to subscribe for instant access to new episodes and offers. There's also a ton of free content and ways to learn more and engage more at WorleyRealEstateNetwork.com. Until then, we'll continue to bring you recipes for success and real stories from real people who, like you, are living out your divine purpose. And hey, God loves you. No matter what happens, don't give up.